But movement doesn't always look like aggressive training. In fact, I would argue most of our movement profile in the day should not look like aggressive training. Can you just stretch on the floor, go for a walk, go dance to the tune of a few songs? And will that help to re-energize you? I bet it will. It's
Hmm.
not about throwing heavy weight or doing aggressive cardio in those types of scenarios. So that I would challenge a client on those two fronts.
Well, it's a real pleasure to have Courtney Townley on the show today. Welcome.
Thank you. It was so fun to have you on my show recently, and that episode was so well received. So I'm happy to be here with you again.
Oh, great. Yeah, we're going to get some new ideas from you if people haven't heard about you yet. Well, I did share, hopefully, and people who have are signed up to the newsletter can had found out about that and follow the reels. But it was so fun. You're so easy to speak with, and you have a great like radio voice. I don't know if we will hear it soon. But you're a great host, everything. So it really is honestly a pleasure to have you here. I feel like we're so in alignment. We met through our mutual friend, Lainey Gray, she's a health coach. And I always send her my gut people, like who have gut issues. She's so good with figuring that stuff out. But I listened to your podcast episode recently with Lainey. Well, you've done many with her, but the latest one is so good that the two of you are so sensible. Like when I listen to you, it's like, yeah, yes, it makes sense. And it's not extreme and it's not fear mongering. And it's just real practical tips. So thank you
I
for
really appreciate
that.
you saying that because I feel like that is I feel like that's the hill I want to die on is just the sensibility in the wellness space because I feel like it's so easy to lose that. And so anyway, thank you for that.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I'm just rolling off of that. I think that's why I like you so much because I get a lot of people who are just so confused with all the conflicting information and this is good and this is bad and do this and don't do that. And we know in this day and age with social media, it's all about clicks and likes and hooks and clickbait and driving your stick in the sand with something really extreme. It's terrible. And this is what I try to do. And I know you're doing this too, is to help women navigate through all that noise
Yeah.
and make that difference and figure out what applies to them. That's why I always like the biohacking space because then we can just sort of try to filter what we're hearing and maybe some of that does apply to you or maybe it doesn't. And I think you're very, very similar and just understanding that we're all bio individual and we all have different reactions to perhaps the same things, right?
Yeah, and I love so much. I appreciated so much in our interview when you explained your definition of biohacking as running an experiment, right? Women running experiments to see what works for them. Because I'd never heard it explained that way before. And I'm such a champion of that, that we are all so different. And the only way we figure out what works for us is by being willing to run experiments. So I
Exactly.
love that.
Oh, cool. So I want to share a little bit more about you and your background, and then how you became in a health coach, as well. Actually, what really stands out for me is more than just a health coach. You're a self leadership coach, and you really are empowering women, and not just eat this, don't eat that. You don't ever do that. You really drive that into the fact that we can be our own leaders. And maybe you want to explain how you even got into that space.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always start with saying that I came into the world a dancer. I was in the dance world for the first 25 years of my life. And I don't know, at the time that I was a dancer, dancing was not all that lucrative, right? It was going to be really challenging for me to put food on my table as a dancer. And a friend of mine had suggested that I go get certified in Pilates. And so I was like, oh, well, I've been taking Pilates. I enjoy it. So I'll go do that. And what that experience ended up doing is opening me up to the whole world of sort of fitness and wellness because I started certifying trainers for this company, Stop Pilates in Toronto, Canada. And they would fly me to all these conventions and conferences. And I just started to see how big this conversation was. And that got me really excited. And I also happened to be working with a lot of midlife women, even though I was not in that age bracket yet. That was the population that seemed to be attracted to working with me. And what I realized very quickly was that the hour or two people were spending with me in the week training was lovely and great, and they were getting good out of that. But it was really all the other hours that they were out of the facility, out of the gym, that really mattered to improving their health and well-being. And I was so ill-equipped to have those conversations. And I felt like people really wanted to have those conversations. How do I get better sleep? How do I manage my stress? What should I be eating? So I always say that wellness to me is the proverbial onion. It just sort of led me down a pathway of education where I started to learn more and more about nutrition. I ended up opening a strength training studio because I started to realize the value of, yes, Pilates is lovely and a great method, but there was a lot missing from it. And so through all of that, I really just started to be able to offer more to my customer. And I started down this rabbit hole of fat loss for about a decade. And I was very successful at helping a lot of people lose a lot of weight. What was interesting, however, is that people often didn't maintain it in the long run, right? They would revert back at least part way to where they came from. And that was fascinating to me. Like, why aren't people maintaining this result that they worked so hard to get? So another layer of the onion came off, right? Where I really needed to learn more about the psychology of behavior change and understanding the capacity people either had or didn't have to be with their emotions without eating their emotions or shopping their emotions or doing 1,000 other things. So that really led me more into the self-leadership conversation because ultimately what I learned was that there is so much amazing education available to us in this day and age. And like you said in the intro, it can be so overwhelming to navigate that. And I think the best place for a lot of women to start is with what they already know and what feels true for them and what feels like true nutrition for them. And starting to teach them how to apply that with some consistency, because that's really the missing ingredient from so many of our wellness journeys is we dip our toe in the pool, but we're never really swimming in the pool. And swimming in the pool is that consistent effort.
Mhm.
And when I say consistency, I don't mean like doing the same thing all the time, day in and day out. Sometimes it does look like that, but it's really consistent self honoring. And what does that look like? Because that looks a little different depending on what's happening in your life, depending on your stress loads. And so that just became the conversation I started to get very interested in was what is a woman's total stress load? What are the things that are contributing to this stress load? How do we start unpacking the unnecessary stress and also building our capacity to tolerate stress? Because it's both and, right?
Mhm.
We need to remove unnecessary stressors, but also do things that expand our capacity to tolerate stress, like strength training, like mindset work, like getting a good night's sleep. That all helps to expand our capacity.
So you mentioned consistency. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, the automatic thing that I'm thinking of is, yeah, let's just be consistent with our diet or be consistent with our sleep routine. And you said it wasn't exactly that. It's not exactly that. So what what is it exactly? I'm thinking a little bit more like when life happens, and this is probably why people get off the bandwagon, which I hate that word, but off the bandwagon, and then they just slip into old habits. So I'm guessing when we are maybe consistent with ourselves, like you mentioned, is self-love or consistent with other ways, then how are we going to manage and stay true to our health goals while life happens? Maybe somebody died in the family, maybe the kids came home for some reason, and maybe you are traveling and you want to experience everything there is to offer when you're traveling. How do
Yeah.
we stay consistent and not quote unquote fall off the bandwagon, still reap the health benefits?
It's such a good question. To me, it really boils down to this concept of structured flexibility, which is it's the opposite of all or nothing thinking, right? So often we get into this mindset where if I can't do my full workout, I'm just not going to do it today. Or if I can't eat the way that I've been eating for the past several weeks, then I might as well just throw caution to the wind and eat whatever I want. And I always say there's like a sweet spot in the middle of a spectrum, right? So there is a place where we can allow ourselves to be flexible with the expectations that we have for ourselves, given what else is happening in our life. So we have to stay honest with ourselves about what else is happening in my life right now. Like, what is my stress level right now? If I had someone recently pass away, that's a really big stressful event, especially if it was someone close to you. And grief takes a lot of resources from us. So, how might I recalibrate my self care? How might I reconsider my self care to allow more flexibility into that? Maybe I need someone to cook for me, right? Maybe I need to give myself permission to sleep in a little bit longer. Maybe I need to go for a long walk outside today rather than going to the gym. Right? There's a flexibility within self care that, man, I do not think the wellness industry is very good at promoting. It's like it needs to be this way. This is the way it's supposed to look all of the time. And all I see that doing is causing a lot of face plants, right? We just trip up and then we beat ourselves up because what's wrong with me that I can't do the same, apply the same amount of effort all the time. And that is literally the death of consistency, rigidity, and expecting it to look the same all the time.
Yeah. And we more than ever understand the fluctuations that happen in our mood, our physiology, our emotions when we're going through perimenopause. So if you don't give yourself that grace, wow, it's going to be a really hard transition. And I completely agree. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are, because I sometimes hear pretty big influencers in the fitness space, and they would say things like, if I don't work out and they're fit and they look great, I feel really bad. And as much as an overtrainer I was, and even during my overtraining days and not getting enough recovery, I never felt like that. I never felt like there's days I didn't train because of whatever reason, whether it was just I didn't feel like it or just life happens. I'm traveling. I was a nomad back then. So I felt like when I hear that, I kind of go, wow, I'm not sure if that's what that means exactly. Is that healthy? Is it not healthy? Because then it seems like when life happens, if you feel bad when you don't train, when that life happens, you're not only going to have to deal with the stress that ever happens, or you're just traveling or whatever, but you're going to feel bad because you're not working out.
Yeah, and two things come to mind for me in that particular scenario. Like, number one, I would be really curious to know if that person is feeling bad in terms of like just about themselves, right? That I'm not a good person or something is wrong with me if I can't work out to the degree that I normally do, given this new situation. So I would definitely, if that was my client, I would challenge them on that. Like, how exactly are you feeling bad? Is it physical or is it emotional? Because those are two different things.
Mhm.
And if it's emotional, that's some mindset work that we need to work through. Nothing has gone wrong here. The other thing that it makes me wonder is if it is physical, like someone saying, I physically don't feel well when I don't work out. Well, that makes sense because your body has such a massive need for movement. But movement doesn't always look like aggressive training. In fact, I would argue most of our movement profile in the day should not look like aggressive training. And so, can you just stretch on the floor, go for a walk, go dance to the tune of a few songs? And will that help to re-energize you? I bet it will. It's
Mhm.
not about throwing heavy weight or doing aggressive cardio in those types of scenarios. So that I would challenge a client on those two fronts.
Yeah, I think there's that emotional component and then there's the physical component. And I'm
Yeah.
sometimes wondering, maybe, of course, we feel good. We feel probably better when we're training and we're happy with ourselves, or
Sure.
we feel physic, can understand the endorphins that are released. So, of course, I feel
Yeah.
better when I exercise or I train, but I don't necessarily feel bad. I feel better when I do, but it's that feel bad thing that makes me really question, oh, wow, that's pretty serious if you feel really bad. But
And I do think the human brain also likes certainty and we kind of like routine. And so when we fall out of that, I think there's a little bit of friction there as well. But to me, again, that's where self compassion comes in. Life is full of uncertainty, and the curveballs are going to come for the rest of your life. The curveballs being things you just didn't expect. And so, me having a head cold as we're doing this interview today, right? That's a curveball. And so my self-care today is going to look different than it would on a day that I actually feel like I have energy and everything is running smoothly. It's just a different level of care. But if
yeah,
I expect myself to perform at the same level today, then I'm going to probably be sick longer and I'm going to get myself into a whole heap of trouble.
exactly. So in your podcast, and you often talk about power and purpose and impact.
Yes.
Tell us what they have to do with health and well-being, and then how a woman in menopause or in this menopause transition can have more power, more purpose, and more impact in her life.
I love that question. So, power is an interesting word because I think a lot of people, especially women, I have found, have almost an aversion to that word. When we talk about power with women, we talk about being empowered. But when we talk about power with men, we talk about power. Like it's weird
Oh yeah.
that we have that,
Right.
the different conversation. And I understand that a lot of us have an experience of power over someone trying to dominate us or make us do things a certain way. And that always feels gross, right? Nobody likes that kind of power. But the power that I really encourage my clients to amplify is their ability to influence their own thoughts, emotions, and behaviors to live a life that feels aligned to them. That is power. Because when I'm living in a way that feels congruent with who I want to be in the world, I feel powerful.
Mhm.
I feel creative. I feel confident. I have more energy. I mean, everything in my life goes better when I'm living in alignment with myself. Purpose, I think, is incredibly interesting at midlife because I hear a lot of women use the language like when their kids leave the house or maybe they change careers. I don't really know what my purpose is anymore because their roles have shifted. And my response to that is always, well, first of all, you get to decide your purpose. It's not something that's bestowed upon you. You get to decide what you want your purpose to be. But the reason I talk about purpose so much in my work is more about living on purpose. When we live by defaults or by reactivity, that is not on purpose. And think of all the things that maybe you do, or a listener maybe can question that in themselves. What are things that you do reactively that you know pull you out of alignment with yourself, right? We all have things that we're not proud of in our reactivity. When we live, there's Greg McGowan who wrote the book Essentialism. He talks a lot about living by design rather than by default. And I think that's such a beautiful phrase. And to me, that's what living on purpose is. It is choosing consciously that in the second half of my life, this is really the woman I want to be. I'm clear on that. And a lot of women haven't done that work. They haven't gotten clear on who they want to be. So that's 101. When I have that clarity, I get to check in with myself every single day to ask, how well did I do on that front? And where might I need to like maybe change some things tomorrow or learn some new skills so I can show up more fully as her? So that's where purpose comes in. And then impact is really when we take excellent care of ourselves, when we are consistently self-honoring, we make a bigger impact in the world
Mhm.
because we are more energized, we are more creative, we are more solution oriented, all the things. And so I truly believe that when we are taking care of our health, I always say cell to soul. So on a cellular level and a soul level, of course, we're going to make a huge impact in the world because we're being fully expressed. And that's what humans are meant to do. We're meant to be fully expressed.
I love that. There are two things that I really want to emphasize. One is the living in congruence
Yeah.
piece. And you mentioned, yeah, I think it's hard. And then living on purpose, I want to tackle that as well. The being in congruence, I think, is not so easy for some women. It's like, I think it's society telling us to be a
Of
certain way or
course.
do a certain thing. And
Yeah.
so when we are not congruent with our feelings or what we're doing, because we have this pressure, I understand that it must be really hard to break. I mean, I'm sure that's happened to me as well, where I'm like, I don't feel right. But I feel like I have to do it because X, Y, or Z, or somebody's telling me, or society's pushing me. So how do we live more in congruence, or at least break from that fear of being different?
Yeah. So I encourage every client I work with to create what I call a power statement. And a power statement is simply finishing the sentence: when I am living with power, purpose, and impact, I'm a woman who what? Right? Answer that question for yourself. I'm a woman who takes great care of herself for the day, but also be clear about what that actually means. I'm a woman who is willing to have hard conversations. I'm a woman who's willing to set boundaries. Have a heart to heart with yourself because so often we are outsourcing the standards for our life to other people, to culture at large, to our families, to the women around us. And I'm asking you to tune in and ask yourself, what does it really mean to live congruently with you? And I usually introduce a concept called borrowed beliefs, which is simply a lot of the thoughts and beliefs that we have about how we're supposed to be showing up are borrowed from other people. They were never ours to begin with. So there is some ruthless editing that needs to be done when we do that self inquiry. Is this mine or is it someone else's?
Mm-hmm.
Do I really want to be getting up at 5:30 a.m. every day to go to an aggressive boot camp style class because I should, or because I truly feel that is something that I want to be doing for myself? There's a difference.
Is there an example you can give us from one of the clients you've worked with that shows someone who maybe struggled with that living in congruence, and then you worked with her and how she came out in the end?
Yeah, I'll share a story. And this is actually in my book. So I have full permission to share the story. But a client of mine, and this often is the case, where a client will come to me and they want to hyper focus on fixing their body. That is often the impetus for coming to work with me, which of course I'm always going to challenge right away. Like, why do you feel that your body is broken? Like, where is that belief coming from? And this particular client, her name is Bethany. She was just so convinced that if she could just take better care of herself and reshape her body and remold her body, it would fix a lot of other problems in her life, like her marriage. And in her marriage, she was being massively disrespected, right? It was not a healthy marriage. And so I challenged her to really just consider, like, what are your standards for your own life? How do you want to be showing up just as a woman? Yes, in your marriage, but as a human on the planet. And she just got really clear that I want to have self-respect and I want to treat myself with self-compassion and I want to be able to make decisions that are congruent with what I want in my life, on and on, right? So she got that clarity. And ultimately, what happened is she did start to amplify her self respect, right? So she did find it much easier to start taking care of herself. She started eating better foods. She hired a trainer and started working out more consistently. She took some trips away by herself to have some alone time because she really felt a hunger for that. And ultimately, she started to amplify the relationship that she had with herself. She started to mend that relationship. And as a byproduct of that, like, this isn't necessarily a happy ending on some fronts. She did end her marriage because her level of respect got so high. She just wasn't willing to tolerate that anymore, not from herself and not from anyone else. And so to me, like, that's a great example because I think it's not what we traditionally hear either. It's not just about diet and exercise. It's about the spaces and places in your life that are causing integrity pain.
Mm.
And integrity pain, if you know, it's a phrase I've used forever in my work, but it's basically living life in a way that just is misaligned with how you want to be showing up. And when
Well,
we start
yeah.
solving that kind of pain, we get a whole lot healthier.
How long did it take her to get through this
A few
process?
years.
A few years, yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting. Yes, it's
a
not
few
going to
years.
happen in a
No.
day.
But I will say this, when I say a few years, I mean to where she is today, that her divorce being complete, sort of being in a space where she really is operating with so much more integrity in her life. But I would say that within 3 to 6 months, she was feeling the benefit of the work that she was doing. And that's what kept her going, is she started to see all of these glimmers of positive things happening because she was taking better care of herself and because she was changing her self narrative and her belief about herself. And so, even though it was a longer journey over a few years, I think the initial benefits started much sooner than that, which is how she kept going.
I'm not sure how she or the techniques that you're using, but there's one technique that always stuck with me from it was a conference and there was another health coach or psychologist, can't remember who said that it was especially for women with eating disorders. And she said, put a picture of yourself on your phone when you were 5 years old, a picture of yourself when you're 5 years old. And then I want you to look at every time you say X, Y, or Z negativity about yourself or your body or whatever, you look at that photo and try to say that to your 5 year old self. And I sort of use this and I'd like to flip it for a lot of things. And I'd say, treat yourself like a 5 year old. If you've had any children, you wouldn't say these horrible things, or you wouldn't let them stay up all night or skip dinner and just drink wine or just eat candy. Like, you wouldn't do that. So,
Yeah.
and I think that was a really helpful technique to give people perspective and try to treat themselves better when they sort of take a step back and look at themselves in that way.
I love that. I love that so much. And I talk a lot about parenting the brain and just parenting yourself because if you think about it, hopefully, and I realize this was not the gift that everyone was bestowed, but many of us did have parents that were very interested in our growth and becoming independent adults and good people on the earth. And that level of parenting, of course, eventually needs to become our own responsibility, which is also why I'm such a fan of self leadership. Our parents aren't going to parent us for life, right? And so at some point along the lifeline of growing up, we have to assume that responsibility that I'm now going to parent myself, which I think that exercise does so beautifully. How would I talk to my 5-year-old self? And what's interesting about that example, too, is you probably hear this a lot. I hear this a lot where a client will sort of go down a trajectory of I don't know what to do. I don't know how to handle this. I have no idea. And so they're looking to outsource the solution. And the question I always pose is if this was your daughter, if this was your best friend, if this was someone that you loved dearly and they came to you with the exact same problem, what would you tell them? And all of a sudden they've got 1,000 answers. For some reason, when we turn it into ourselves, on ourselves, asking ourselves that question, it's like, oh, I don't know. But we do know. We do know. We just have to give ourselves permission to know.
Yeah. Those are
And also be
great. Yeah.
okay that I have that level of knowing. And it's also okay to honor it.
Hmm.
And again, I think largely over the last 30, 40 years, the way women's health has been packaged is that someone else knows better,
Yeah. Yeah. You're
right?
right.
And I do want to say, I am a huge champion of hiring coaches and trainers and nutritionists and physicians and all the people. I truly believe healing is a team sport. That's what I always say. And at the end of the day, no matter what you learn from any of those professionals, you're going to have to apply it under your own agency. And so, again, it's ultimately always going to become an exercise in self leadership.
Yeah. Gosh, I wish we could learn these things when we were younger, right? I
Oh,
think there's such a lack of this, myself included. And it's only when we tend to get to this menopause transition, we do stop for a moment. Sometimes the kids are older or they're out of the house and you have a bit more time or you can self-reflect. You're not running around like a chicken with your head cut off trying to get kids to school and all that. You just more, I think, self-reflective. You also don't take so much BS, but you also have a little bit of time. So it's a chance for a rebirth, actually. It's a chance to change things around if we want to. And I think it would have been great, I think, if we did this earlier. So we wouldn't, I guess this transition would be maybe a little bit easier if we were. But are you finding women in this stage of life coming with more self introspection or at least stopping for a moment, questioning it? Or you just literally have to, because they're still running around like crazy and I have to pull them out and
I
help
think it's a
them?
little bit of both because I tend to work with a pretty large spectrum of age groups. Like I work with women anywhere from like late 30s up to mid 70s are the women that make up my community. So there's a little bit of everything, right? I have women who are very much in the workforce, raising children still, and yeah, they have no time. And then I have women who are recently retired or have been retired for a while, and they have different challenges navigating those waters. And I even have, interestingly, outliers. I have some women in their 20s and early 30s, and I'm constantly saying to them, you don't know what a gift you're giving yourself by doing this work now, right? Because when you get to this stage of life and you are required to renovate a little bit, it will be an easier task because you have these skill sets on board.
Yeah. So, okay, then what about, let's talk about menopause and rebrand that word.
Yeah,
If you could, what would you call it?
I love that. I mean, I feel like this is a little bit, I don't know how often you've heard this answer, but I do see it more as an invitation, right? I love just thinking of menopause as an invitation because nothing has gone wrong. However, we are being asked to honor ourselves on a different level. And that can be hard when we have built a life a certain way, when we have been able to tolerate a certain level of stress for the first half of our life. And now with hormones changing, we really have an invitation, we have an option. We can either stay rigid in our approach and keep trying to force the things that we've been doing in the first half of our life and expecting our efforts to be the same and our self-care to look the same and all of that. And to me, that is a direct route to crashing and burning and making menopause so much harder than it needs to be. Or we have this invitation to reinvent, right? To rework our lives. I call it the renovation years for that reason, right? To renovate what isn't working. It isn't working for me to work 12-hour days. It isn't working for me to say yes to everything that people want me to do. It isn't working for me to not move my body throughout the day, right? And so it's really getting clear on, again, where's the incongruency, right? When I've defined how I want to be showing up in this next half, where are the gaps there? And here's the thing, we can't tackle all the gaps at once. Please, anyone listening, do not try to tackle all your gaps at once. That's a terrible plan. But I always say the beauty of health is very multidimensional. It's not just one thing. We treat it as a physical pursuit, but it's not just a physical pursuit. It's mental, it's emotional, it's relationships, it's environmental. And if we start to improve the health in any one of those areas, our health overall is going to improve because our stress load is going to go down. So you can pick one gap. It doesn't matter what the gap is. It doesn't have to be about diet or exercise. It could be, I'm going to try to put myself to bed 30 minutes earlier. I'm going to try today to pause and intentionally give myself a little pep talk a few times today. Like I'm going to practice talking nicer to myself. Like we're just pollinating our life with these little nutrients, right? And the more we do that and the more consistent we are, health starts to amplify. We start to feel better. We start to sleep better, everything. And please don't hear me saying diet and exercise aren't important. Nobody's arguing that. Of course, I'm a huge fan of those things. But I feel like we've been boxed into this conversation that that's what it's all about. And it's not. Like the wholeness of your humanity is so much more than diet and exercise.
So,
And so,
yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
I was just going to say, so how do we approach health and giving ourselves permission to honor all those different dimensions of ourselves and not just make it about fixing the body or hyper focusing on diet and exercise alone?
There's a question that we posed, or at least a lot of professors in my gerontology courses were proposing, and they asked us asked us how to define health. What do we think health is and means? So what is your definition of health?
Oh, I have so many, Zora. So I said this earlier, I'll repeat this here, is integrity. I think integrity on a cellular level is health, right? Your cells have so many jobs to do, and if they're not functioning properly, we're probably not going to be very healthy humans. So this is where the diet and exercise conversation comes in. We want to give ourselves, our bodies, what they need to be able to have integrity on a cellular level. But we also need integrity on a soul level. And that means liking who you are, what you do, and why you do the things that you do. So I used to train twice a day, 7 days a week. Yeah.
Wow.
With a toddler in
More
tow,
than me.
by the way.
I
Yeah,
thought I was an
insane.
overtrainer.
And I was working with an amazing movement coach, and I loved him so much. I still do to this day. So much respect for him. And I was convincing myself I was doing it for the love of it because I've always been a mover. I've always loved movement and kind of challenging my own movement skill.
You're a dancer. Sorry.
I was
I'm
a
a
dancer,
dancer
of
too.
course,
So I
right?
know what you mean.
But I got to the point where I really started to see, and I could see this in my dance career. I could see it now as a grown woman, like working with trainers and other coaches. I was trying to prove something. I was trying to prove my worth to somebody who, didn't really even care. Right. But I was always, and I think that probably was ingrained in me in dance because I was always trying to impress the choreographer or the director because I wanted certain roles. And as dancers, you're not doing things the healthy way, you're doing things to make it look good. And man, is that a great descriptor of the wellness industry, right? If you just look a certain way, you're deemed healthy, and that's such hogwash.
Yeah.
Health is not a look. Health is integrity. I would say health is also a direction. It's not a destination that we ever reach. It's a direction we travel in. And you are going to get lost in the woods so many times, right? Like life just has a way of taking you on paths you didn't intend to be on. And so the self leadership comes in and just recognizing that, wow, I'm in a part of this journey that I didn't really want to be on. Like, I didn't mean to move in this direction. So I'm just going to reroute myself. I'm going to make the next decision one that moves me back in the direction of health and well being. Like right now, listeners can even ask themselves that question. What decision can you make right now that would move you in the direction of health and well being? It can be that simple.
Yeah.
And I think we're big campers. We live in Montana, so we're outdoors a lot. And when I'm lost in the woods, I don't sit down and tell myself that I can't find my way out for the next 6 months, right? I'm going to pull out my compass. I'm going to look at landmarks. I'm going to ask myself some good questions, and I'm going to find my way out.
Yeah.
And so I do love thinking of health as a direction. And I also love thinking of health as relationship, because you are in relationship with everything in your world, with other people, with food, with exercise, with sleep, with stress, with yourself. And the quality of those relationships will determine the quality of your health.
Absolutely. Well said. Okay. So you have been coaching women in the health and well-being sector for 25 years, more or less.
Yeah, long time.
It's a long time. So what
Yeah.
are the four crucial skill sets that are missing from most health programs that are particularly important for women in this menopause transition?
Yeah. So I would say the first thing is that self inquiry we were talking about earlier, which is really awareness. I mean, that sounds so overly simplistic, but if you are not aware of the truth of your life, why you do the things that, not just what you do, but why you do the things that you do. Why do you watch 5 episodes of your favorite Netflix show when you told yourself you would go to bed earlier tonight? Why do you reach for alcohol every time you're stressed rather than feeling it and sort of maybe finding some solutions to that stress? Awareness, Martha Beck says this, awareness is the way out. And I feel that with such a busy world, and women at midlife tend to be, I've never met a midlife woman who's like, I'm so bored. I just have so much time on my hands. I don't meet those people. I meet women who are just, their schedule is so full, they hardly have time to breathe. And so starting to create what I call white space in our calendar, which doesn't have to be epic periods of time, but it could be 5 minutes in the day where you just sit and you tune in and you kind of notice your internal world. Like, how am I feeling? How am I feeling physically? How am I feeling emotionally? Like, how am I showing up right now? I mean, it's just asking those simple questions, but awareness is everything. So awareness is number one. Organization, I would say, is number two. I say organization because most women I meet are awesome at getting the fancy planner and the color-coded markers and writing a plan for how they're going to show up for everyone else today, right? What they're going to do at work, what they're going to cook for dinner, how they're going to take care of their house, all the things. And they just don't seem to show up in their own schedule, right? And at midlife, you know this, I know this, our brains go through some transition as well. And brain fog is a very real thing. Decision fatigue is very real. So earlier we were talking about life by design rather than default. If I do not get intentional about how I am going to show up as the woman I want to be, I'm always going to live in default mode. I'm going to keep showing up as the woman I've been. So what am I doing today specifically to align myself with her? It doesn't mean every minute, every hour of your day has to be decided in advance. But when you decide on the gap that you're filling right now, like maybe I'm trying to improve my relationship with sleep, I need to make a plan for how I am going to get better sleep, because it's not just going to happen because I decided for it to happen. I need to put some things in play. When I need to start winding down, what I might need to do to wind down, what time do the lights need to be out, what might I need to change about my room environment to help me sleep better, those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
The third thing is probably the thing that I coach on the most, which is why we don't follow through with the things that we promise ourselves. And that really boils down to, I would say, 3 things. Number one, nervous system regulation. If you are constantly amped up, fight or flight mode, you're not actually using the prefrontal cortex of your brain, which is the decision-making part of your brain. It's the executive center. It's what helps you to parent yourself. That part of your brain is not online when you're always in fight or flight mode. So I need to make sure that my day is oscillating between periods of effort and periods of recovery, periods of effort and periods of recovery. That is not how most women live their life. Most women live their life like this in the day, right? The stress is just going up, 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 and then they crash at the end of the day to burn. So we need to oscillate our day to honor our nervous system. We also need to learn how to be with emotion without reacting, without numbing, without escaping, because man, we're good at that. Humans are awesome at avoiding difficult emotion. And we do a lot of damage to our health. We stay up late watching Netflix. We eat the sugar and the chips. We skip the workouts. We get kind of volatile in relationships because we're reacting to emotion rather than just being with it and asking it some good questions. So I think that's a big piece of it. And then the other piece that goes right alongside of that is we have to manage our brains. We have to parent our brains because we can create a lot of emotional turmoil by how we're thinking about our lives and what's happening in our lives.
Yeah.
And so what's happening in your brain is not a fact. It's an option. I always use the example of I went to an art class years ago where everyone in the class got the same piece of art, but we all colored it differently. Right? Some people used bright colors, some people used really muted colors, and at the end of the session, everyone's artwork looked very different. And that's how I think of thoughts. You get to choose how you color the things that happen in your life, and you can choose colors that make you feel terrible and really make you not want to show up in any effective way. Or you can choose colors that totally ignite you and make you want to pursue the things that you want to pursue. And so to me, that's really what thought management is. And then the final piece is just realignment. You actually opened this whole interview today with, I think you used the example of when someone passes away, right? Or you get sick. Like curveballs are coming. It is a fact of life. And you will get, like I said earlier, lost in the woods. So how are you going to reroute? How are you going to bring yourself back? And a great way to bring yourself back is just knowing your anchors. Anchors are the things that help you to root yourself back into the version you want to be. And for me, sleep is an anchor. I mean, it is for most people, right? Like there's nothing a good night's sleep can't help soften. So sleep helps to anchor me. Usually just having 5 minutes to kind of put pen to page and journal about something I'm really rumbling with. Why is this feeling so hard in my business? Why is this feeling so hard in my relationship? Because what it shows me is a whole lot of thinking. And I get to look at that and say, oh, isn't it interesting that that's how I'm interpreting this? Is that useful to me? Is that helping me? Or is that actually harming me? And if I notice it's harming me, which by the way, after all these years, at least 60, 70% of the time, I'm thinking things that are harming me, but then I get to edit and I get to think about it in a way that is actually more useful, not necessarily positive, but useful.
There's so many things that make perfect sense. And I think it's all great. It sounds really like there's awareness and
Yeah.
there's planning and there's organization, and it can be hard work. It's the stuff that we don't really want to go to or look at or avoid, or it's painful. And like you said, the default mode, it's so much easier. And not to even mention, there are people who have had childhood trauma or they have eating disorders, or I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you can that makes people do the things that they do that are maybe not so healthy for them. And
Yeah.
so it seems to me, as like you said before, your health is a team effort. I imagine it must be.
Exactly.
Can people really do this on their own? Maybe reading books or listening to videos, or do they really need help with this? Because it's quite challenging, especially if
I
you
think
have
the
those
answer,
other
yeah,
background.
I think the answer is the same answer for so many things in the health and wellness conversation, which is it depends. You just laid that out so beautifully, right? It depends. Like, what is someone's history? I mean, I am definitely the first to acknowledge that if someone has a lot of trauma they're trying to heal, I'm going to point them in the direction of someone who can really help work through that with them, right? If someone has an eating disorder, if someone has a chemical dependence, self-leadership in those examples looks like hiring people to be on our team that can help to support us through that level of healing. So I don't want anyone to misinterpret that self-leadership is a solo effort because it isn't. It's just having the wherewithal and the self-respect to say, I can't do this alone.
Mhm.
And so self care right now looks like hiring someone or joining a support group or just bringing people onto my team that can help me work through this. Even being in the arena with other people that are working through the same type of challenge can go a long way. But then there are people who probably can do this themselves, right? Who don't have necessarily a chemical dependence or any kind of trauma. And so they they do start to practice things and it does start to improve their life. So it really just depends. It depends on the person.
You talk a lot about behavior change in your podcast and how that's such a foundation. And how are you seeing with the women, at least you're working with, is it how it must be really challenging for women in midlife, right? Because we have so much hormonal change going on in addition to if you have any of the baggage as well from your life history. So how challenging is it, are you finding it for women in midlife to make behavioral changes?
Yeah, well, like you just mentioned, the chemistry is shifting. And also, we've had so much practice. We've had so much practice with certain habits that aren't serving us.
Mhm.
And so to rework that is definitely more challenging at midlife than it might have been when we were 15 or 20 or 25 years old. But the way that I always introduce it is number one, it's a practice. Anything can be changed. It just requires a lot of repetition. And in order to engage with that repetition, we have to enjoy the process. So if you hate your process, you hate the things that you're doing, I am 100% sure you will probably not stay the course, right? So we need to find ways of really enjoying the journey and also being in community. I always say that I think that shifting our health and well-being and shifting the way that we approach it is kind of like moving to a foreign country where you don't know the language and you don't really know your way around. And you're really excited to be there, but it takes 6 months to a year for you to really finally just kind of feel like, okay, I can do this. I really struggle with so many programs being sold as 21-day programs, 6-week programs, 12-week programs, because quite honestly, the real work begins when that novelty fades.
Yeah.
And so, again, going back to how I described health earlier, it's a direction. And it's a direction that I hope people are committed to for the rest of their life. Knowing that it's a direction, there is no timeline. And man, does that take a lot of pressure off? Right? I don't need, it's not about being bikini body ready. It's not about the reunion that's coming up that I want to look smoking hot for. Like, I get that mentality. But if we're really committed to deep health, we have to ditch the timelines
Yeah.
because it's just literally reinventing the way that we live and the way that we think and the way that we pursue our lives. And that doesn't happen all at once. But when we're surrounded by a community and we're surrounded by like minded individuals that are also practicing those types of skill sets, it becomes fun and it doesn't feel like so much work.
That's
It
good
just
to know.
feels
Yeah.
more like an adaptation, right? I'm adapting to this new environment.
Yeah, you're becoming a new person. Imagine it as like a transformation. And it's the 12-week boot camp that sells, the quick fixes that sell because we want it to be a quick fix.
We love it to be a quick fix. I would love it to be a quick fix. If I had that pill, I would sell it, right? If I truly believed it worked. And it just doesn't exist. And I think those programs can be helpful. Some of them, if they're well intended and they're giving good education, I think they can help someone get traction.
Mhm.
But I find that if we don't assume that self-leadership role, we become room bouncers, where we bounce from program to program to program to program, kind of convincing ourselves that nothing really works. I'm destined to fail. Menopause sucks. It's the beginning of the end. And none of that is true, right? When you sign up for a program, know why you're signing up. I'm signing up because I want to learn about my gut. I want to learn about gut health. I want to learn how it influences the rest of my health story. And then I'm going to take that information and travel with it along the journey of health. But I'm not expecting that this one 21-day program is going to solve all my health problems and then I'm just never going to have to think about it again.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if we go into it knowing that it's maybe a jump start or like you said, the awareness, why are you
Yeah.
taking it? Or let's just learn something new, knowing that whatever transformation you're looking for is probably going to take years. And if you put that timeline, years, but knowing that maybe you'll have some small wins along the way, and that helps motivate you. I've seen people do that, jumping from program to program to program. And then, yeah, they're like, I have all this information. I know what to do. I
Right.
just don't do it.
Yeah.
And that's the behavior change. And that's where the problem lies for many people. And that's what you do. That's why you're here,
Well,
right?
and that program bouncing has kept the diet industry alive for decades,
Yeah.
right? Because we just bounce from diet program to diet program, or we bounce from exercise program to exercise program. And yeah, it can definitely be a very vicious cycle.
And I don't think any of them are fails. Actually, if you
No,
look at it, you've certainly learned something from each program. If you, even if it didn't stick or you didn't reach your goals, that process of going through a program and listening to information, even having it in your head, is beneficial. You learn something new. That's amazing.
even if it's what doesn't work for us, right? Like
Yes.
that is learning. Like, and that's why I love the way that you talk about biohacking. Because to me, again, this is all an experiment. We have to be willing to get in the arena with trying a lot of things on to decide what works and what doesn't work. And also be open to the idea that what worked for me 10 years ago may not work for me now.
Yeah.
Right. So I have to, again, there's that structured flexibility piece. I need to be open to things shifting as I shift. Yeah. So I think that's really important.
So you mentioned that menopause, well, midlife, I think, is the renovation years.
Yes.
Right. And I like that. There's a very famous gerontologist, Gene Cohen, who called this sort of phase of life for men and for women, this midlife, the if not now, then when
I love
decade,
it.
right?
Yes.
Or
Yes.
time. And that sounds a little bit what you call the renovation years. Why don't you explain a little bit more what that means to you?
So I often share the story that when my husband and I first got married, we were so desperate to have a house of our own. And first of all, my husband's a builder. And we didn't have a big budget. Like we had no budget really. But we were living on the East Coast, and I remember going into this one home that from the outside it was great. It had pretty windows and it was on a nice lot in a great neighborhood. And I'm not kidding you when I say we walked in and you could feel yourself sinking into the earth. The house was imploding.
Oh, no.
And I, in my optimism, looked at my husband and I said, "Oh, babe, we can just like lay a new floor and it'll be great." And he's like, "Honey, no. Like, this house is broken at the foundation." And I think we often arrive at midlife and we realize that there are parts of this house that are amazing. I'm so proud of some of the things that I've built and that these things are working really well for me, right? There's walls, there's windows, there's nice paint on the wall. And I also have noticed for me and all my clients I've worked with over the years, they're usually looking around saying, and there's some things that definitely need to be fixed, right? So maybe that's their diet. Maybe it's a certain relationship. So I would say for almost every woman I've worked with, there's definitely work to be done on their relationship with themselves. Like I've never worked with someone who didn't need to do that level of work. But it's just renovations are exciting. They can be. They can be drudgery too, right? If we don't really go into it with the right mindset, it can be awful. But if we look at it as an opportunity to really build our dream home and to really just make this into what we want it to be and accept it's going to be inconvenient, it is going to take time, you're going to have to make some concessions, you will get there. Right? That's why I call it the renovation years, because I think that it kind of gives it a light twist that there is work to be done and we can make that painful or we can make that really fun.
Yeah, exactly. It's like menopause is inevitable, but suffering is optional, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Can choose. We have a choice, but and I also see it as not an if or, but I look at it as a both and both in the sense that there will be when you are renovating a house, so we could put the rose-colored glasses and try our hardest to be all positive. But there'll just be parts of the renovation that we like and parts that we don't like. I mean, that's just the same thing with business. Like what you're doing, I'm sure you're passionate about what you do, but there are parts of the business that's like, I don't like it, but you got to do it. Right. So it's a both thing, but with the positive attitude and focusing on why you're doing this and the passion that you have or perhaps the end goal, is the motivating piece, knowing that in the end, it's going to be renovated. It's all going to be fabulous in the end.
Exactly. Two things I want to say to that. Number one, I love that you brought that up because my son is 15 and we're having a lot of conversations right now about just what he might want to do as a job in his future. And I'm always telling him, honey, no matter what you decide, there's going to be parts of it that you don't like because that's just life. That's just work. That's like the pursuit of anything that you care about. There's going to be the muck and mire, right? There's going to be the parts, the messy bits that we'd rather just skip over. But the second piece is that there's a great quote. I don't know who said this, and I'm sure I'm butchering it, but it's something along the lines of the sooner we accept that life is one long series of problem solving, the less we will suffer. And I love this, especially talking about renovation during menopause, because again, my husband is a builder. How often does he go in a home and a client is just so excited to have a new bathroom because all she wants is to pick the tile and the paint color and like all the fun bits, right? But when he starts the renovation, he often realizes there's mold behind the wall or a new foundation does need to be laid because the problem is bigger than they thought. And we can look at that as a stop sign, or we can just look at it as a problem that needs to be solved. And I think that when we accept that that is life, life is one long series of problem solving, and menopause is definitely indicative of that, right? It shows us where a lot of the broken bits are, where things maybe weren't as resilient as we thought they were. And sometimes we just want to look great, but I got to do some gut health work. I just want to feel really fit and vibrant, but I need to go to my PT because I have to address this back injury, right? Like there's other things that come up that we are going to have to face and work through, and that's okay.
Yeah, and they tend to accelerate with age. When you're younger, most of the time, and not that it doesn't happen, but it just, you may have things happen once in a while, or a little health challenge. But as we get older, yeah, we got a little bit more wear and tear. We got injuries. We have an accumulation of toxins, or we have the gut health issue. It's just an accumulation. It's these things pop up more and more. So you're forced to be more resilient as you age. And then with the menopausal transition, the hormones fluctuating, it makes it harder without the hormones. So I think that's part of the challenge, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I always think of the problems. Might be a helpful reframe for people listening. When the things arise that you really wish you didn't have to do work around, think of it as your life curriculum. There is something in that problem that you are meant to learn and address. And your problems are going to be different than mine because I have a different life curriculum than you do. But when I look at it as it's like life is unfolding this amazing curriculum for me, and I don't always know why I have to learn this thing, but down the pipeline, I'm probably going to look back and be so grateful that I learned that. I'll give you a great example. I have a client who, high level athlete, she's an avid runner, it's definitely in menopausal, and running is almost her way of dealing with the stress of the day, right? It's just her relief. She loves everything about it. And she hurt her ankle. And for a period of time, she couldn't run and she had to go to PT and she had to do all this alternative therapy. And as we were coaching through that, we were trying to find ways of her really enjoying that curriculum because honestly, her mindset was this sucks and this shouldn't have happened, period. Right. But as we worked through it and like really giving her the challenge of looking for ways to find joy in this and to learn something new in this, she did. She started like having slower mornings. She started to learn how to become more comfortable with the quiet and not the rush of the day all the time. Like it really was something that I don't think she could have learned any other way. And this was life just saying, I need you to learn this lesson.
Oh, such a great way to frame it. And it's absolutely true. And I'm sure many of us who are listening can think of something in life that was a challenge. It was a struggle. We hated it. We cried. We pouted, fought our way. And then in the
Oh,
end, you have to go through it and you come out on the other end going, you know what? I did learn a lot. I'm glad it's over or whatever. But there's always a silver lining and there's always a way to reframe these things. And as much as, or as painful as it may be, life is a little bit easier when you do look at it that way. And believe me, I understand with hip osteoarthritis and then two
Oh,
hip
yeah, you
replacement
do.
surgeries. I've gone through my why me and this shouldn't happen. And now I
Yep.
can't do all the exercise I want to do. And everything that's I'd found joyful taken away from me. And you could sit in that negative mindset. But one day I just said, look, this is not serving me to think like that. And I get to do surgery, or I'm lucky because there are people who have this issue and they cannot. And this is not the worst thing in the world. And you can reframe, I'm going to be bionic, or you can reframe things as you want. And it certainly helps you get through it. And boy, have I been on so many podcasts now talking about hip osteoarthritis that I
Yeah.
never knew. I never had a pain to purpose story. Now I have one. And so they're always good things, right?
I love that. I love that. I think that's great. And I love the phrase, just a helpful thing for listeners if they need it, is when you are in that space of having to do work that you really would rather not do, it's for now. Like just for now. For now, my focus has to shift on healing my hip. For now, my focus has to shift to healing my gut. For now, I need to go to PT. But for now, it just reminds you that this isn't a forever thing. This is what self care looks like right now. And if you fail to acknowledge it, you're going to suffer a whole lot more.
Yeah.
So, this is going back to that. Just self care doesn't always look the same. It
Mm-hmm.
just, depending on what life is delivering, it is going to ask different things of you. And we have to be open to what it's asking.
Such a great conversation. I love this. I'm going to have to wrap up. We've spoken
Yes.
so much about so many things. I hope this is all useful for everyone who's listening. I know it is. You've got a book called The Consistency Code, a midlife woman's guide to deep health and happiness. And I'll have a link to that in the show notes. But you've got a new book coming out. Do you want to tell us about it?
This is the new book. So, The Consistency Code is
Oh,
the book
that's
that's
the new
coming
one.
out.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Okay. I
It's my
thought,
first and only, it's the first book, my only book so
oh, your
far.
baby book.
Yes, my debut book, and it's coming out in November. November 5th is our launch date. And honestly, it's so much about what we've talked about today. It starts by really helping women to understand maybe the false bill that we've been sold around health. Like it really talks initially about what health is not, right? Health is not a look. Health is not a data point. Health is not even the absence of disease, because life is going to give you a lot of disease.
Mhm.
Not disease necessarily, but disease. And then I talk about ways to reframe health that make you much more excited to pursue it. I talk about how behavior change really works from a neurological standpoint, so people kind of understand the science behind behavior change. And then I go into those practices that we talked about earlier, right? The practice of awareness. What does that actually look like? I give women lots of tools for that: practice of organization, practice of follow through, practice of realignment. Because obviously at midlife, we are so fortunate at this period of time to be having conversations about menopause, because my mom's generation didn't, right? And so there's so much benefit to that, and getting back into HRT and understanding that it's not a terrible thing for women, and having access to these things is wonderful. And there is no medical support alone that is going to amplify your health cell to soul. Like we have to do some of the heavy lifting. So if you choose to do HRT, lifestyle still matters. I mean, I know you preach that all the time. If someone decides to do something like a GLP-1, you're still going to have to focus on the lifestyle stuff. And so helping women with behavior change on that front from the self-leadership perspective is really what the book is all about, because it's the heart of the work that I've done for years, and it's what I just believe in my own heart.
So great. I'm going to have a link to your website, and you
Yes.
probably do have a newsletter where people can get notified when that's going to come
Yeah,
out.
absolutely. If people sign up for the newsletter, we should actually have the sort of the notification for the book up pretty soon. We're waiting for the book cover, which honestly should be done like in the next 10 days.
Love it. And you've also got a program, Women Reignited Power Pack. What's that all about?
Yeah, Women Power Pack it's all about just helping women, gives them some exercises for a lot of what we talked about here today in terms of like parenting ourselves, reframing things in our brain, like how to start doing some of that thought work, how to start generating emotions that are more useful to you, how to get clarity on that power statement for yourself. So it's a lot of the things that we talked about here today, just in a nice little like companion guide that they can print out.
Oh, how great. I gotta go
Yeah.
print that out and see what usually go to print these things out. But anyways, I'm so glad you came. I'll have links to everything in the show notes. You got your Instagram, Grace Grit, and I have your email, your website, graceandgrit.com, and of course your podcast, Grace and Grit with Courtney Townley. So please, everyone, go check out the podcast. It is really good. You have such a good voice. You're so balanced, and I'm really grateful that you are empowering more and more women through this phase of life. Thank you, Courtney.
Same to you. Thank you so much, Zora.